Alright guys, it is that time of the week. We are back to go ahead and jump into our championship predictions. We also had a couple of games going on over midweek as well, which we will be discussing throughout the video, but 12 more fixtures to dive into. As always, do get your score predictions down below, but without any further ado, let's hop into these. Starting out with Friday night's game, we've got Birmingham going up against QPR at St Andrews. Now, this is quite an interesting matchup, really. Birmingham, I've quite liked the look of recently. Obviously, they did lose over the weekend, but got quite unlucky not to take at least a point from Blackburn, given the amount of chances they created in this one. It was just a case of Thomas Kaminski coming up with an absolute worldie of a performance to deny them any points from that one. Going up against the league leaders in QPR, who are just finding the way in each of their matches at the moment. I didn't think it was their finest performance over the weekend against Wigan, but a good first half managed to get them over the line. Obviously just about held on as Wigan were getting back on top in that second half. Birmingham do tend to keep things quite tight, especially at St Andrews. I think I'm edging towards a draw in this one, you know. Score prediction, I'm going to go for a 1-1er. Don't think there'll be all too much to separate these two, but QPR could snatch it. Next then to Ashton Gate for Bristol City up against Swansea. Bristol City been a tough side to call recently. 2 wins, 2 losses from their last 4 matches. Wasn't a great performance last time out. They were well beaten against Reading, and this will be a case of whether or not they can go ahead and bounce back. I'm sure that Swansea will be surging with confidence after how well they did in the South Wales derby, up against 10 men for the majority of that game, but they were by far and away the better team in that game, and some lovely goals scored in that one as well, some brilliant passages of play, and generally speaking, Swansea are one of the form sides in the Championship at the moment. They're in the top 6 for a reason, having won 6 of their last 7 matches. If we discount that game they had against Burnley, where they just seemed to fall apart a little bit, Swansea have been excellent for their money recently, and I think they take the 3 points in this one. 2-1 Swansea, I'm going for this game. I think they take it on the road. Next then to West Brom up against Sheffield United. News from West Brom, they've finally gone ahead and made the appointment of Carlos Corberán. This one had been long rumoured and they have since announced it. Baggies fans, I'm interested to get your take on this one in the comments down below. I'm interested to see which version of Corberán we sort of get with this West Brom squad, because throughout his time with Huddersfield he was quite changeable really with his style, and early on was perhaps a little bit more gung-ho, perhaps to Huddersfield's detriment with how that first season went for them. Was a little bit more adaptable then in that second season, tightened things up at the back, and obviously led them to that spot in the playoff final. It's a different set of players and circumstances that he's working with at West Brom though, so particularly interested to see how these first few months go for him. Up against the Sheffield United side, who are currently on the longest winless run in the Championship, which stretches to 6 matches now. Now, we did see some more positives from the Blades in that second half against Norwich, and this one really depends on which version of Sheffield United turns up. New manager bounce with West Brom. I think I'm edging towards a draw here. 1-1 I'm saying for this one between these two. Next then to Turf Moor for Burnley up against Reading. Burnley extending the winning run to another week, and that's now 30 matches Burnley are unbeaten, having won against Norwich in midweek. Now, they had to be fairly patient in terms of building the play up, had a lot of the ball for that one. Burnley, Norwich were frustrating them for a lot of that game, but in the end, the penalty towards the end, which Jay Rodriguez converted, was the difference between the two sides, and Burnley looking really good, I must say, at this point in time. I think for potentially a finish in the top 2 come the end of the season. Reading have been that quite unpredictable character, especially on the road so far this season. You never quite know which side's going to turn up. They had that 3-game losing streak themselves, but managed to bounce back last time with a good solid team performance against Bristol City. I think I have to edge Burnley for this one though, just the more complete package at the moment, and following on from the midweek win, I think it's going to be another unbeaten round for Burnley. 2-0 to the Clarets, I'm saying for this one. Next then to Cardiff up against Rotherham. Rotherham, I thought, who really got quite unlucky in midweek not to have taken all 3 points against Coventry. It was a late penalty which got the home side back into that one. Very soft penalty, I must add, on top of that, but up until that point Rotherham had put in a really good battling away performance. Fantastic second goal he scored as well, that splitting through ball from Barley's, that sort of quality that he has in an absolute abundance, and I think they'll fancy their chances going up against out of form Cardiff side in this one, if I'm being honest. Cardiff, who have lost their last 3 matches, I'm sure will be down in the dumps after the South Wales derby as well. They failed to score in their last 3 matches, Cardiff, and they've got no no Callum Robinson for this one either, given his red card and subsequent suspension after that game against Swansea. So I think most things point to an away win here, if I'm being honest. 1-0 Rotherham, I'm saying, between these two. I think they'll just take it on the road. Next then to Coventry up against Blackpool. Obviously I got to see Blackpool in the flesh over the weekend against North End, and while I didn't think it was their finest overall performance of the season, they were clinical in the moments that counted, and recently I think that's been applicable to most of Blackpool's matches really. 11 goals they've now scored across their last 4 league matches. Jerry 8 on a fantastic run of form at the moment. Patino continues to pull the strings in the middle, and it's an interesting game this one, up against the Coventry side who I didn't think looked quite at their best in midweek against Rotherham. Obviously we just discussed it then. Thought they got a little bit fortunate maybe with that late penalty, which looked incredibly soft, but not their finest performance of the season, but still managed to get back into it with a 2-2 draw. Gustavo Hamer with another goal, and Coventry always tend to leave things late, don't they? They have that knack for scoring and levelling things up quite late on. It's also worth pointing out that they have been a fairly tough nut to crack recently, Coventry, having only lost 1 of their last 9 championship matches, and wouldn't be surprised to see this one heading towards a draw. I'm going to go for a 1-1 between these two. Don't think there'll be all too much to separate them. Next then to Huddersfield up against Millwall. Huddersfield, who I'm struggling to get inspired by at the moment, if I'm being honest. They obviously had that win against Hull, and we thought that maybe that could have acted as the catalyst to go ahead and get them going for the season, but from that point onwards, it's not quite happened for them. Now, they have been keeping things tighter at the back. They've only conceded 3 goals across their last 4 matches, but the shortcomings this Huddersfield squad has been with consistently hitting the back of the net. They can be a threat from a set-piece delivery or something like that, but consistently from open play, they are firing blanks at the moment, and they are going up against a very informed Millwall side who have won their last 4 championship matches and are unbeaten across their last 5 now. They left things late against West Brom, but managed to get things over the line in the end, and they're just finding a way to win. They've been fairly adaptable with how they've gone about some of those victories recently, and I think they come into this one as the obvious favourites. Score prediction, going to go 2-0 Millwall for this one. Fancy them for another win. After that, we then head to Hull City for Hull up against Blackburn. Quite like the look of this Hull side recently. 7 goals they've now scored across their last 2 league matches. Finally seems as if stuff is clicking for them and they're looking like a more cohesive unit throughout the entire team. We knew coming into this season that they'd have some good individual talents, but that's finally being replicated into consistent performances. Going up against the Blackburn side, who have been going well themselves recently in the Championship, finally got a little bit more consistency about them as well, having won their last 3 matches. I did think they got maybe somewhat fortunate in that game against Birmingham. Didn't craft out all too many chances, but were clinical with the ones they took, and obviously Thomas Kaminski was just absolutely on one for that game. On the road so far this season, Blackburn have been a little bit unreliable. They have lost 5 of their 8 matches away from home, and just with the way that Hull are going at the moment, why not? I'm going to back against the league table. I'm going to go 2-1 Hull in this game, and I'm going to back Blackburn to go back to their inconsistency. Next then to Luton up against Sunderland. Listen, there's no getting away from Luton having a little bit of a disaster over the weekend against Watford, and a game of that magnitude as well, given how well Luton had done up until that point with the unbeaten run, the football they were playing. I think everything just boiled up into the perfect circumstances for Watford, ending up turning them over in that game. What you would say about Luton is they do tend to have decent bounce back ability with Nathan Jones. He always tends to get his teams fired up and doesn't let them sort of mull over defeats like that for all too long, and this is a decent opportunity, dare I say it, to go ahead and do so against a fairly out of form Sunderland side at the moment, a Sunderland team who have only won 1 of their last 7 matches now. Now, Sunderland got everything right in that first half against Burnley, but for whatever reason, everything just seemed to crumble around them in that second half as Company's side took full advantage and put 4 goals past them in quite quick succession. I think they're edging towards a Luton bounce back here, you know. I'm going to go 2-1 to the home side. Sunderland just been a bit too unreliable recently. Next then to Carrow Road for Norwich up against Stoke. The pressure being piled on Dean Smith. As of recording right now, Norwich haven't made any sort of movement on the current manager's situation, but it's now just 1 win in 8 for Norwich. Another really flat showing, I thought, in midweek against Burnley, where I think the 1-0 scoreline probably massively flattered Norwich in that one, given how many opportunities and openings Burnley had to go ahead and make that worse for them. It's a game against Stoke in this one. I take the point that Stoke themselves haven't been at their best recently. Obviously, they got that win on the road against Preston, where I thought they played that one perfectly away from home, but then couldn't follow it up with a performance at home, having lost both of their last 2 matches. There were some positives to take from those games, but ultimately Stoke have looked fairly blunt in the final third recently. But this just has the feeling of, a former manager coming back to Carrow Road in Alex Neil, who could compile the misery on Dean Smith at Norwich, and this, could turn out to be the final straw for the manager there. And for a score prediction, I'm going to go for a Stoke win on the road. I've really just not been impressed with Norwich recently. 2-1 Stoke, I'm going for that one. After that, we head to Deepdale for Preston up against Middlesbrough. Preston looking to bounce back from that pretty dismal defeat over the weekend against Blackpool, and not going to be an easy one now, given that Middlesbrough have gone ahead and appointed Michael Carrick as their new first team coach. Now, in terms of Middlesbrough, they've not been great recently, but when you go ahead and appoint that new manager, you tend to get a bit more of a spring in your step, and I'm excited to see what sort of ideas Carrick brings to this Middlesbrough group. I do think he is a coach that will need to be given time. I imagine it's going to be quite the switch up from going from quite a traditional manager in Chris Wilder to a coach like Michael Carrick. But there are players, and I still hold this viewpoint that there's still a hell of a lot of talent in that Middlesbrough squad, which is still waiting to be unleashed. And I think under the right coach, he can get that out of this group. I think it probably would be written in the stars for someone like Emile Rees to have an absolute worldie in this game, given how much he was linked to Middlesbrough over the summer. But we as Preston fans just want to see some entertainment at home now. We're 8 games into this season in terms of home matches. We've only seen 1 win. We've only seen 2 goals scored in that time as well. I've got a really bad feeling that Middlesbrough may just take this one on the road, surely for that sort of new manager bounce and Preston being frustrated recently. Score prediction, I think Borough may take this 1-0, which could be a massive frustration for us. And then to round things off, we've got Wigan going up against Watford. Watford yet to string together back-to-back wins under Slaven Bilic, but what an opportunity they've got to go ahead and do so this time. Probably their best performance under him so far, that 4-goal showing against Luton. We have seen positive indicators from Watford previously though, and they just failed to deliver it up with a following performance. Looking back to that game they had against Stoke when they beat them 4-0, followed that up with back-to-back defeats. That game they had against Norwich, which they won, followed it up with a 3-0 defeat against Millwall. So tough one to read really. Wigan aren't exactly on the greatest run at the moment though, having lost 5 of their last 6 matches. They also boast the worst home record in the Championship as things stand, having just picked up 6 points at home all season. I did think they got fairly unfortunate, to be fair, in that game against QPR to have not taken at least a point from that one, given the chances they created in the second half and generally how they played in that second 45 minutes. But could this finally be the opportunity where Watford starts to get a bit of consistency? I think it could be. I'm just going to edge the away side there for a 2-1 victory. I think they may finally string together back-to-back wins. But guys, there we have it. That will now wrap it up for today's video. Thank you very much for tuning in. As always, do get your score predictions in the comments down below. Very interested to see which way you guys are swaying for these matchups. Got quite a few tight ones going on this weekend. As always though, do leave a like and do stick around and subscribe for some regular Championship content, and I'll see you all in the next one.